Do you ever struggle with where to put your focal point in your painting or your piece of art? Well, I had a student ask me this in my private Facebook group, so I thought I'd do a Tuesday's tip about how to avoid the dead zone and give you 3 ways that you can figure out where to put your focal point in your painting or art. All right, I'm Viv, founder of Art with Viv, and this is my Tuesday's tip. It's just a tip to help you save time, save money, or become a better artist, and who don't want that? Okay, let's dive into today's tip. You always want to be aware of that dead zone. So I'm going to give you 3 ways to find the sweet spot to place your focal point, or other people call it center of interest, the star of your piece of art. All right, so let's start off with what not to do. All right, things to avoid when planning your painting. Do not put your center of interest dead center of your paper. That is the dead zone for sure. Avoid doing that, because once you do that, it actually divides your paper or canvas, whatever medium you work in, into 4 equal quadrants, and that makes for a very boring visual story. Now, if you have followed me and you have seen some of my other Tuesday's tips, you'll know that the whole point of composition is to tell the most interesting visual story that you can. The number 2 thing to avoid is putting your center of interest, your focal point, too close to the edge or the corners, because once you do that, that leads your eye out of your composition, off of your paper, off of your canvas. And the whole point of doing a really nice composition is to allow the viewer's eye to explore your painting, to roam around, and ultimately find your focal point. Also, number 3, avoid placing more than 1 focal point in the painting. You can only have 1 star of the show. So if you put 2, they start competing. It confuses your viewer. Also, if you put too much busyness in there, it'll confuse the viewer. So you want to keep it as simple as possible. You want to pare it down to only have the elements in there that are really necessary to get your story across. So the 3 methods for placing your focal point, figuring out where a good spot would be number 1, the rule of thirds, number 2, 4 rectangles approach, or number 3, the 7 unequal spaces, also called the golden mean approach. So the rule of thirds is pretty simple. All you have to do is divide your paper into 3 equal sections horizontally and vertically. And where the lines intersect, that's where you can put your center of interest. On this diagram, I have the center of interest circled in red. So those 4 spots would be great places to put your center of interest. So just pick one spot, not all 4. Remember, we only want 1 focal point. Pick one area, and that's where you would put your center of interest. All right, the next is the 4 rectangles approach. The 4 rectangles approach is also pretty simple. You just divide your paper into 4 unequal rectangles, unequal sizes, and wherever the lines intersect, that's the best place for your focal point. Remember, you can move these lines. You don't have to do it exactly like this diagram so that you're always putting your focal point in that lower right-hand corner. You can slide the vertical line over to the right. You can slide the horizontal line up to the top. You can move them around as long as you have those 4 unequal rectangles. And again, where it makes the X, where the lines cross, that will be the best place for your focal point. All right, now the 7 unequals approach is a little more complicated, so I'm going to go through it step by step. It's also called the golden mean approach. This is just one example how to do it. This diagram is just showing you one example. I'm going to go step by step so that you can figure out how to do it on your own and put your focal point in other spots. All right, so here are the steps. There's 4 steps to doing it. First off, you'll want to mark the center of each side of your paper with a dot. You want to mark it center horizontally and vertically, and you'll see I have the 4 blue dots at the center spots of my paper. Then you want to decide where it is that you want to put your focal point. For this demonstration, I'm going to put the focal point in that I want it somewhere in that upper right hand quadrant. But I don't know exactly where the best spot to place it is, so that's why we're going to go through the golden mean, where to find that golden spot. So step 2, once you get it divided with the 4 dots, you'll place a dot halfway between your center dot and the right edge of the paper, because remember we want it in that right upper quadrant, our focal point. Now that you can see your paper is divided into a square and a rectangle, and this is important because the focal point will always be to the inside edge of that square. It's never going to be the outside edge of the square. So hopefully you can see that there's a square on the left hand side and a rectangle on the right hand side once you divide it with that red dotted line. Now don't draw these lines on your paper. This is just for visuals. Then step 3, on the side that you want your focal point, and remember we decided we wanted it in the right upper quadrant, draw a line from the top corner, the corner that is going to be nearest your focal point, diagonally down to the lower corner. So always start in that corner that's nearest where you want your focal point. In this case, it's the upper right corner, and we're going to do a diagonal line all the way down to the opposite corner. And then step 4, on the same side as you want your focal point, you'll start in the lower corner and you will draw a diagonal line up to that middle point that we did. And that'll give you 7 unequal spaces on your paper. And where those diagonal lines make the X, that is the golden mean. That's the spot where you want to place your focal point or your center of interest. So if you wanted to do it on the opposite side, then you would draw your dots, your 2 red dots would be on the left-hand side between that left-hand edge and the middle, and you would just do it the opposite way. So the best thing is just to figure out where you want your focal point, a general area, and then follow these steps and you will find that golden mean. So let's review. Avoid placing the focal point at the center of the paper. Avoid placing the focal point on the edge or the corners. Avoid having more than one focal point. You'll have the 3 methods that will make it easy for you to find the correct spot, the most visually interesting spot for your focal point if you use the rule of thirds, which you divide your paper up vertically into thirds and horizontally into thirds, and where those lines intersect, that's where the best place for your focal point is, and you'll have 4 different spots you can choose from. The next method I showed you was the 4 unequal rectangles, where you just divide your paper up into 4 unequal rectangles, and where the 2 lines intersect, that is where the best spot for your focal point will be. And remember, you can move the lines around. The focal point doesn't always have to be in one spot. That was just one demonstration, just one method, so that you would see how the method worked. Now, 7 unequal spaces, or the golden mean, that one's a little more complicated. It's got 4 steps. You'll want to divide your paper in half vertically and in half horizontally. You'll want to kind of decide what side of the paper and if you want it up or down, your focal point, whether you want it up or down or which side of the paper. And then you'll start on the corner nearest that one, go diagonally down to the opposite corner, and then you will start in the lower corner or the upper corner, depending on which corner that it was nearest, that's the one you start with, the nearest one, and then you go to the opposite corner or the one below, and you'll go up to the midpoint. And that will make your paper into 7 different quadrants. And where those 2 diagonal lines meet, mix, whatever you want to call it, X marks the spot, that's your golden mean. So I hope this helps you figure out exactly where that you want to put your focal point. Gives you 3 easy methods. You can use any of them. And so if you want more, I have a completely free course on how to paint this beautiful butterfly in watercolor. You just go to my website, www.artwithviv.com. Totally free course. And you can get that, and you'll have a little bit more of an art adventure. And I hope to see you on the inside. So that's this Tuesday's tip. Bye for now. Happy painting.